Ever wish a podcast would explain how to get better faster from the standpoint of longevity, biohacking, and personalized functional medicine? Co-hosts Dr. Jason Bradley and James Chester, along with executive producer Rachel Bradley, bring you the Get Better Faster podcast. Their mission is radically simple: to revolutionize health by connecting people with the experts, technologies, and protocols that mainstream medicine ignores. Because people deserve to get better faster.
Hello, GBF Nation. I am Dr. Jason Bradley, and along with my co-host, the one, the only James Chester, and our incredible executive producer, Rachel Bradley, we want to welcome you to another exciting episode of the Get Better Faster podcast. Today, we're joined by an absolute warrior in the truest sense of the word, Shaun Saunders, a breathwork expert who brings a level of credibility and real-world application that's simply unmatched in this wellness space. Shaun served 13 years in the Australian Defence Force, where he not only completed one of the world's most grueling military courses, he then went on to train military divers, tactical assault experts, and top military performers in mind-body self-regulation science. Now, Shaun has taken that elite military expertise and channeled it into helping everyday people just like you and me harness the power of intentional breathing for stress management, performance optimization, and health transformation. He's the co-founder of the Online Breathing Academy and someone who I am honored to count among my friends and is one of the main people I would turn to when the shit gets real. This is breathwork from someone who's literally applied these techniques in life or death situations and then refined them for the rest of us. Without further ado, Shaun, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jason. It's great to be here.
Shaun, it's really good to have some camaraderie with you in the green room today and just chatting with you about life a little bit and this big game of breathing. And you come from a much different world, as Dr. Jason was saying in introduction: high pressure, elite military, Hollywood production, but breath. When did you realize that you could help people with breath work and it was a game changer that bridged performance and wellness?
It's a good question. I think where it really stemmed from was going through my career in the military. I started out in general entry, always had that hunger to go and do something, get to the next level, get up, up level myself. And so the only pathway in the military really for me was to go to special forces. So that was the road that I took. During that type of training, it's, the training is, you could imagine it's like training an elite athlete, training for the Olympics or training for something that's super high level. I think one of the big differences though is that not only is it physically arduous and you have to be at peak level physically, but you have to also be able to have a combat mindset or, the resilience to be able to, push beyond extremes. You can imagine they're the most extreme situations in the world where it's life and death. So there's a different level of training or capacity that comes from that. And so where that kind of took me was, how does the mind and the body then interlink? And this was really the key, was like, well, the body will do all of these different things, but it's generally the mind, and it's generally, as we were talking about earlier, fear will creep in, all these different human emotions that come to the forefront. And in kind of looking at, well, what's the link here between the mind and body? And what it really came down to was a couple of things. Number one, the breath or breathing is really a link between the mind and body that I've found. It's the only system in the body that so far, as we know, is conscious and unconscious, meaning that, if you are asleep, your body breathes. But generally also, if you want to take control of your breathing, you can take control of your breathing and intervene. So there's this unique situation. The second thing that I looked at was, on a hierarchy of survival, breathing is like right up there, right? And there's this kind of, it's a little bit of a, I guess the sayings are a little bit general, but it's 4 minutes without air, 4 minutes without, 4 days without water, 4 months without food. That is kind of like, if you're really trained, a lot of people say 4 months without food. What the hell? It's, if you're highly trained, you can get to these levels where, you can start to survive the body will adapt and survive. And so if you think about that 4 minutes without air, that's right up the top. So this led me to kind of like start thinking, and we started really studying the whole idea of breathing, because if it's only 4 minutes in the hierarchy of survival, then your body is going to do everything it can to take the next breath. And that's easily illustrated by something, for example, I'm sure you guys may have had this experience, but did anyone ever hold you underwater when you were a kid? A friend or a sibling or something. What happens? People absolutely panic, right? Like they will fight tooth and nail to be able to get air back into the body. Mm-hmm. So if you think about that from the perspective of just the general everyday, if someone is breathing inefficiently, they have dysfunctions in their breathing, and they're unconscious to them or unknown to them, then it will lead them to have everything from, diseases and pathology right down to behavior changes even. So this is really the essence of why I looked at this system, was because I was looking at, in health and wellness and in performance, in psychology, in behavior, in all these areas, what is the thing that really moves the needle? And for me, it came down to looking at, I'm a big believer in the body, really knows what to do. And it's quite often our mind that gets in the way. Quite often, just because of the way that we're wired, it's a double-edged sword, our intelligence. So really I was looking at, okay, well, what is this thing that's driving the body? What's this thing that's driving the mind? And breath was where I settled. So that's really how I got to where we are today.
Performance-based, like, I think it's dynamic what you're talking about. Hold the breath for 4 minutes, you die, And if you want to create somebody superhuman, try to drown them. They're like you said, try to like keep somebody underwater. That person's going to become supernatural. They're going to find resources within themselves that they didn't know they had before to get that next breath. And I think you explained something really interesting, because we've all been, in a pool environment where one of our friends, when we were little, tried to like dunk us or, submerge us. And the next thing you know, you've done everything possible to break free from that momentum and that feeling to get that next breath. I think it's quite interesting. And you did say something really pivotal there. You said it's subconsciously, it's always on, but we can also control it. So there's an override system within us that if I don't want to breathe right now, I can hold my breath and I override that onboard system that always keeps me alive. And I think it's really, I'm curious to ask so many questions, but you said that you're helping people work on this. Is your own experience like doing this type of work? Is that when you decided that you had something that could help more people get better faster?
Yeah, I think there was two things in there, and we'll come back to the breath holding thing too, James. I think it's interesting to talk about because the current world record, I believe, is about 28 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So I want to address like how that happens and I mean, this can go down the rabbit hole, but I'll come back to.
We love rabbit holes, Shane. So you're
fine. We're gonna chase some rabbits here for sure. I'll come back to. I think nailing what where like you just sort of encapsulated, James, part of it, and I think part of it is this unique property that we have around breathing and all the different systems it affects in the body. If I break it down to we had quite an interesting journey. We came to Breathwork, and I'll say this has been a little bit unpopular amongst the Breathwork people. I don't think Breathwork is that great for everybody, right? And I'll explain why. We err more on the side of breathing, and there's a big difference between the mechanical aspect of what you do with breathing. So that's just literally moving the air in and out of your body. That's not the important part. The important part is the respiration. It's the gas exchange that happens. And so this is literally a story of whether you're getting enough oxygen to your cells, right? And we think that if we just pump air in and out of our lungs, that we actually get oxygen into our body, and it's just not the case. The real secret to whether you retain oxygen is carbon dioxide. And so this is a long held, it's something that's been known since the 70s, but it gets ignored in, say, breath work as such, because a lot of the time people will prescribe a breathwork thing. Let's take it, for example, everyone knows the circular breathing thing. You see people all around at the moment, they'll go and they'll lay down in these big circles and they'll have someone just get them to breathe and breathe as hard as they can. Now, what often happens is some people like it. Other people that don't know what just happened to them. Some people have an endogenous psychedelic effect from it, right? And this is from changing the gases in the body, lowering CO2, all sorts of different things, and it shuts off areas in the brain. And some people have these, what they would term as a spiritual experience. I've seen it happen so many times. I would never deny it. It is definitely a unique experience, but you will often have a large group of people that will have a panic attack. They'll have a negative experience with it because they're already in a dysregulated state. So this is where it really gets important as far as how we've looked at breathwork and how we got into it. It wasn't until really that I started to see that a lowered CO2 state, which is called hypocapnia, that's the medical term for it, will cause personality changes. It will cause, it will mimic diseases in the body. So, for example, it might mimic, heart attacks. It might mimic all these. It's got this whole laundry list of things that it could mimic. And so what you often find, and we've studied with a psychologist that's been doing this for well over 45 years, Dr. Peter Litchfield. He's been in this field for ages, and he gave us a stat when we first went to learn with him. He said that 60% of all ambulance call-outs in the US are highly likely from hypocapnic symptoms than they are from people actually having, a heart attack or, something else that's going on for them. So really how we kind of arrived at this, we arrived through the lens of breath work and very quickly had the experience. One of the experience I recall was, we hosted an event with Wim Hof. People are familiar with Wim. He's the guy that really brought ice bath and breathing around. I wasn't always a fan of the breathing method, and we had 500 people in the room, and they all started doing the circular breathing. And Angie and I were there, and we just witnessed a whole group of people in there that had these CO2 seizures, and we're all like, not having a great time, and we're like, wow, this is not what to do, right? You do not get such a large group of people in and just tell them to go into this really aggressive style of breathing. And that really raised the question for me as to why is that happening? What if this is so great and everyone loves it, right? Why is there this big group of people that actually don't like it? And in fact, if you get further into it, people can, from breath work processes or breath, they pick their favorite breathwork thing. I've even had this chat with yogis, right, that do a lot of pranayama or yoga teachers. And I'm like, you can and will cause dysfunctions in your clients by having them do a style of breathing. It can be aggressive or not aggressive. That will continue to lower their CO2 or reinforce a poor breathing behavior that then puts them in that hypocapnic state. So they're constantly lowering their CO2. And so this is really I know that was a kind of a long rabbit hole of asking me how I got into it, but how I've come to look at it is through the lens of efficiency and understanding that the body already knows what to do. We just get in the way. And it comes back to, James, what we were talking about before, about the mind. This is where the mind gets in the way. This is where someone goes and someone else says to them, hey, I got this breathing thing for you, right? And it's going to be awesome. You're going to love it. And they can prescribe that to them and say, hey, do this, do this box breathing or do this circular breathing thing. You just lay down, and the person has a more than a 50-50 chance of coming back and saying, actually, I feel worse from what you told me to do. Or they don't realize and they develop a dysfunction.
Shane, that's fascinating. And Hypocapnia, again, just to remind everybody of that word, it's a big word, is just low carbon dioxide or CO2, right? So I want to just dive into that, just no pun intended with the divers. I want to dive into that a little bit more. And it's interesting because I think from a general medical point of view, I mean, we're always pushing oxygen, right? But what I'm hearing and what I'm understanding is when we get a low amount of CO2, too much oxygen, we can actually induce, like you said, personality changes, panic attacks, disease manifestations in the body. And I think that's fascinating. First of all, am I understanding it correctly before I go to my question?
Yeah, one technical part on that, Jason, is that it's not exactly that you're receiving too much oxygen. What it is people can go and look this up. This is really just like it's simple, not easy, and it's common science. It's a gradient or pressure gradient issue, right? Like for every oxygen that you want to be released into your body, you have to have a CO2 molecule to punch it out. So as you breathe the air in, you have this punching out of oxygen, CO2, it swaps, right? So what can quite happen, and this is quite common for people will put an SpO2 meter on, everyone's seen the little blood saturation thing, and they'll go, great, look, I'm 98% saturated in my blood. Well, that doesn't mean that oxygen is actually getting into your tissues because it requires the CO2 to do it. So to kind of answer your question, it's not that they get too much oxygen, it's that the actual oxygen that's binded to the red blood cells doesn't actually get into the tissues. It comes in, goes in the bloodstream, and goes back out through your excretion. So you don't actually get that with the right amount of CO2. You'll get the exchange. With the wrong amount of CO2, you won't get the exchange. You'll breathe oxygen in and breathe oxygen back out. Right. So there's this whole aspect to the way that you breathe. And the most interesting thing about that is we actually have a natural mechanism in the body called the breathing reflex, or it's described as the breathing reflex because breathing is reflexive, meaning it's always adjusting to the environment, right? So like if we have, for example, people will often say to us, if you breathe in a circle and you're getting low oxygen, what happens when you exercise? And I'm like, different. You've got lactate, you've got different things that are happening in the body, right? Lactic threshold and things in the body that are happening where the body's requiring more oxygen. As you're running, you're breathing in that same way, but you're getting that exchange because you're getting the right amount of CO2. So it does become you can look at it through the lens of this complexity of all those different pressure gradients and everything like that. But really what the most important thing to understand is that your body already knows how to do it. We just get in the way of doing it, right? That's kind of where it stands. And we can kind of get into that a little bit more, but it's super, I just find it really interesting that, again, it's one of these things about us getting in the way of what our body's naturally designed to do.
Well, which I think is interesting because even where I wanted to go with this, so thank you for the perfect segue. James and I talk a lot about 3 types of intelligence, which we stole from the chiropractic profession, by the way.
It's a borrow.
So, the universal intelligence, which is the creation intelligence, the God intelligence, that there's the innate intelligence, which is that God particle in all of us that just knows what to do all the time, which is what we're talking about, the breathing reflex. And then we have the educated intelligence, which we say always gets in the way of the other two, and it's kind of what you're saying. But here's my question. And I really I hope this is not meant to be a bait. I'm really asking just these words. Why don't we know how to breathe? It's a reflex. What's happened? I'm feeling it. Myself, I feel it. I hear it from people. I see shallow breathing and, I see all that. What's happened to us?
The simple answer to that is modern life, right? I'll put it this way, Jason. The further away you get from nature, the more stressed your organism will be, right? And there's many different, say for example, James has got blue blockers on, blue light, the amount of blue light that we have. All of these things will go towards interrupting or causing stress. And quite often what happens is you can break it down into really simple, easy to think about. You have your external stresses, so all the environmental stuff that that we just described, right? Living in modern life, having to pay the bills, having to drive your car, having to do all these things. All of those are going to create a pressure on the breathing mechanism because the body's always trying to respond to those pressures. The biggest one, and the one that people don't realize, is the internal, is your thinking, your negative self-talk, all these sorts of things, again, will also be in there interrupting. And what it creates is what we call a vicious loop, right? And the vicious loop's easily described like this. Your body knows what to do and how to breathe properly. You have, external pressures. Let's say, for example, you're stressing about money, you're stressing about your job. You also then have negative self-talk, which reinforces that. That then causes you to breathe dysfunctionally. You breathe dysfunctionally, which causes you to have less oxygen retaining in the body, which causes you to have shittier thoughts, which causes you to breathe more dysfunctionally, and it goes round and round and round, right? And so the intervention or understanding that mechanism, and we say this often to our clients or to people we work with, and generally these days we're working with a lot of people in the psychology profession, in the medical profession, a lot of breath workers that come to us to learn, okay, what is it that I don't know about this? And what we'll often say to them is that we have, I'll sit with a client and I'll say, look, here's the good news. The good news is that I won't say 50%, but a large chunk of your anxiety is physical and is driven by you not understanding that your body's breathing dysfunctionally. So if you take care of that, you've lowered your anxiety, then you can take care of whatever the mental and emotional stuff. So actually, there's not as much wrong with you as you think. Right. And this, going towards what we're talking about here, this is how people can get better faster, because they can understand that there is a large physical component to this that you have a lot of control over. Right. And it comes back to what James was asking before or mentioning before about being able to take control of your breathing. This is where you can recognize that there is a lever you can pull on here that can actually lower let's call it anxiety. Let's go the two levers, anxiety and depression, right? You can either raise your vibe or you can lower the, being too wired, right? In a physical sense, if that makes sense. I hope that kind of makes sense in a simple sort of, there's a lot of complexity in that, but.
Go ahead, James.
Well, as you guys are talking about the functionality of the human design, which I think is fascinating, I go back because Jason's talking about this idea of chiropractic, which I have a couple lead-ins to that topic. First one is, have you ever watched one of those adjusting videos of like a newborn where the baby's like whining and crying and having a fit, and the chiropractor comes in and just gently like releases the pressure with a tiny adjustment to the atlas bone and resets it, and the baby chills out and goes to sleep? That's innate intelligence. Like the baby can't speak and doesn't know that this is what it needs, but the relief restores that panic breathing and that cry to this calm and chills it out. And the parasympathetics kick in and the body starts to go into rest and digest outside of fear and flight. So even for like the smallest organism of a baby, on day one, that's crying its head off, getting that small adjustment, releasing the pressure, allowing the breath to come back to an ease rather than dis-ease, the body goes back into homeostasis, which is balance. And the other part of this conversation that I'm stirring up here is posture. And I worked as a tech helping people do spinal rehabilitation for 6 years. And one of the things I'd always do to somebody is I'd have them do one small exercise for me. I'd say, put your head out as far as you can and take a deep breath and feel the restriction. And I said, now put your head back over your shoulders.
Wow.
And take the same deep breath. Is there a restriction? And I would say, well, vital lung capacity depends on our anterior head carriage. And if we get our head back on straight over our shoulders, then our breath becomes easier and we live in a world of ease rather than a world of dis-ease. So when you think about the functionality of our posture and the hyper panic of a baby crying to somebody that has text neck and they have forward head posture, what that does to the dynamics of the quality of life and how simple realignments can change the trajectory of day one for the rest of your life, or the rest of your life today for the future of the rest of your life. Right?
Yes. Oh, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to vote. This is what I wanted to add to that too. I'll say James loves it when I do this. Yes, and I somehow picked this up. Yes, James, and I find it really interesting, and I'm not sure I'm going to say this the right way. So thank you guys for helping me explain what I'm thinking. I find it really interesting that we're talking about, hey, we have, a disruption in our breathing, and it can throw off our gases, and it can cause a disruption in, in our personality state, in our, mood, in our calm, and our not calm, and certainly mimic other diseases. And here we can intervene. We can certainly intervene, to control that breath. But I also find it really curious that, and Shane, you said this in the green room, that our breathing style, and I'm really understanding what you meant now, that our breathing style is really a communication style. And I understand that when we say communication style, it seems like we're talking right now, communicating, but really that breathing is actually a communication style for the rest of your body, and really telling our bodies, are we in a panic state or not in a panic state? And really the question is, am I safe or not safe? I mean, ultimately that's the question, right? Am I safe or not safe? Yeah. And I it's interesting because it is a communication, and a communication is two ways, right? It's a two-way street. So when we're having, I don't like to say abnormal breathing, but disordered breathing. I'll say disordered.
Dysfunction.
Dysregulated.
There we go. Thank you. A word with the word dis in front and then another word after it, right? So, but we have some dysfunctional breathing that can lead to, like we said, those panic states. But then by just jumping in on that one mechanism, we can actually recreate order, recreate function. It's amazing. And like you said, it's communication between, yes, our respiratory system, but our nervous system, our immune system. I mean, it's probably our endocrine system, our hormones. I mean, I see that it's communicating, and I think it's so interesting. I'm still fascinated by the panic state that we're in. We'll come to that in a minute. Panic state that we all might be in, especially in America right now, and we'll chat more about that if you'd like, causing dysfunctional breathing. I mean, the stress itself is causing the breathing problem, and it just, like you said, becomes the vicious loop. I'd love to throw that. I don't know if there's a question in there. I don't know what I'm doing here.
No. I think the way to look at that, there's a couple of ways, and I want to address some of the stuff that James said too, is that oxygen, we talked about breathing in and out, and then we talked about respiration, and then we've got to get down to cell respiration, right? And if we look at, you mentioned the body being in a safe state or not, even from mitochondrial function, the cell will go into a defensive state or a safe state, right? Like that's how and you think about it, if there's lack of oxygen even to that level where oxygen is the end state transport, that happens all the way down to creating ATP, that's, we're getting right down into the
ATP equals energy. ATP energy.
Right down into the cogs, right? If you have dysfunctional breathing, i.e. you are not retaining enough CO2 to get the oxygen in the body, you will have complete and utter, it's suffocation at the cell level, right? So if you think about it, if your whole organism from the cellular level is suffocating, you are not going to feel safe. Wow. You're going to feel off, right? You're going to feel there's a problem.
And the next component, Shane and Jason, is the lymphatic system. You're going to get a head cold. You're going to get congested. And one of the grossest things I ever heard in my entire life is when you have like snot, that's really a form of pus. And you get sick in the lymphatic system because you're not getting enough oxygen to keep the cells healthy, like you're saying, which is this vicious cycle. When people are like, well, I just don't feel good. I can't breathe out of this nostril. I have a head cold. No, it's you have a dysfunction and a dysregulation in dysautonomic nervous system, and you're not able to breathe. So if you can't breathe, of course your body's going to feel sick, and it's going to get that seasonal head cold, or it's going to be shut down, and you're going to get full of pus because the body is actually not lymphatically drained the way it's supposed to because your breathing is off.
Yeah, and it's simple, not easy, right? Like this is where it all comes out. We say this to people all the time, is that it's not easy, right? It's simple. Like it's simple. You can read all this in the science text. You understand that if you're not getting oxygen to the cellular level, you're going to get all these pathologies, right? Everything from being physically sick all the way through to having, as I said before, it can affect your mindset. It can affect your thoughts, your feelings, everything, because you've got this constant feeling of dread or suffocation that's happening in the body, right? And it's a very it's a very mild case of that being held underwater, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to get desperate. You're going to act out. You're going to do things. And the reason I say it's simple but not easy is because what we've really discovered through the work that we've done is that breathing is a behavior. And so what do we know about behaviors? Some behaviors we don't want to give up. Some behaviors we've created our identity around. Right.
Bingo.
It's when I say simple, not easy, it's a simple fix, but it is not easy because of the amount of inertia that it takes to overcome a behavior or a personality trait or something that you've developed. And what this comes into is called state-dependent learning. And so what often happens is something happens to you traumatic. Let's say it's a physically traumatic experience, or it's you've been in a carjacking, you've been in something that has been traumatic. You will breathe in a state, you will then constantly breathe in that type of state, reliving that traumatic experience. So this, you often hear this thing we hear it all the time, trauma-informed breathing. And we're like, actually, probably I think, maybe a good percentage of people that claim they understand that actually don't know what that means, right? What they're saying is, we hear this around breathwork a lot. And again, I'll kind of I'm going to do this thing where I'm going to sort of stick it to breath work a little bit here, is that people think that if you come in and do a circular breathing session, you have this big cathartic release from having this low CO2 state, that somehow you're releasing trauma. And I'm like, that is not how it works, because trauma is it's a collection of memories and it's a state of thinking, but it's also a breathing behavior, right? That keeps you trapped in this state of feeling like you're under threat. And so that's why it's quite often not a good idea to just bring someone in and go, hey, yeah, you do the circular breathing thing or release your trauma. It's like, no. This is not, you're probably going to drive people further into the fear state.
Wow.
Right.
Well, I tell people all the time, the issues are in the tissues. And you're saying that you can't solve one thing until you take care of the core problem. You're going to do more damage if you learn how to breathe properly. You don't take care of the root cause of why you're having the dysfunction.
Sort of, yeah, James. It is really that. It's like you're layering on. It's like it's like you're layering on a cure.
It's a veneer.
It's going to do more damage than like the.
It's a facade. It's a veneer. It's a cover up for the real problem.
That's important. What you just said there, James, is so important, because what often happens is people swap out one habit for another, right? And this often happens in breath work, where people will go, I'm going to do this circular breathing because I feel angry all the time and this makes me feel better. And then what they don't realize is after a while, that dysfunctional breathing makes them feel even worse. It makes them feel even angrier, or it makes them feel, then it creates some other issue with them, right? And I'll just link this back to what you said, because I want to nail what you said about posture. That's really important. If you think about the diaphragm, right? For example, if we're not, quite often you'll hear people talk about, wow, you got to breathe in your belly all the time. It's not true, because remember, coming back to what I said about respiration, it's respiration that's important. It's not how you mechanically breathe that's vitally important. Everyone thinks belly breathing. But one thing I will say about breathing and posture is that the diaphragm sits against the lumbar spine, right? So if you have inefficient movement of the diaphragm, you're going to have I would say a large percentage of lower back pain for people is that they've got a dysfunctional diaphragm. It's not, digestion. Think about constipation, all these sorts of things get affected by whether your diaphragm is descending and retracting the right way. Then let's bring that down to tension, right? So if we have low oxygen in the cell by low CO2, you're going to have tension in the body, right? And I tell people all the time, inflammation, tension in the body, lack of water, and we'll kind of get into, this is the other thing that we often say to people, breathing is not going to fix everything. You got to have a healthy lifestyle. You often get people who will come and say, well, I just got to do this breathing thing. I'm like, it's not a panacea. You have to actually, so, we often find, drink a bit of water, so, low tension, letting the electrical signal move through the body equals living, equals life. The organism comes back up. So, this idea around posture, but then getting down to tension in the body. And quite often what we find is you increase the oxygen, you increase the, I wouldn't say flexibility in the body, but people become lighter, they become less tense, right? And if we think about that from just on a societal level right now, we could use less tension right now in the society, right? So we're getting, the idea of breathing and the cyclical nature of breathing is a microcosm for the expression of you, your life, what's happening in society. We make up, it all comes down to fractals, right? Where, cells in the body, people on the planet, all these things, so I just look at it from this holistic point of view of lowering tension, making sure there's flexibility there, making sure that the organism can respond appropriately rather than reacting, right? And this gets into that question we were talking about, James. I know I'm kind of trying to connect as many dots as we go around in circles here, but we're talking about, fear, right? And quite often, most of the coaching clients I have, this is the interesting thing. People go, well, you're in breathwork. I'm like, yeah. But a lot of my clients are CEOs. They run businesses, and a lot of people go, "Well, what do you do with them? Like, what, you teach them to breathe?" I'm like, "Yes, in a sense." But here's the thing: with business, your most valuable resources are the people that work for you, or that you serve, or that you work with. I said, and quite often, what I'm working with the CEOs on is them actually responding to things that happen in the business rather than reacting. Rather than shouting at someone and losing a really good person that works for them, because that will cost the business a lot of money, right? Like, so we're talking about, the simple, not easy act of being able to take a breath and respond to something rather than reacting. Now, if you're highly tense and your breathing's out of whack and you're dysregulated, it's quite often you're gonna blow up, right? You're gonna say something you regret.
Well, it changes your voice. Like, it's respiration with tone. And if we change the respiration and the tone, it becomes a shouting. And sometimes we talk under our breath. You whisper, and it changes the tone. So our breath really is the life of how we communicate. And if you can teach somebody regulation within that, that's all that matters in the world. You ever hear the old saying when somebody gets emotional and they say, "My God, when I just look at you, Shane, you just take my breath away." And
he hears that all the time, I'm sure.
But you ever hear that when somebody's in love and they tell somebody, "When I just look at you, you just take my breath away"?
Yeah, well, like even in the I guess the warrior sphere and the combat sense, if you read Sun Tzu, the Art of War, they talk about 8 breaths before you make a decision, right? They talk about having this 8 breath count before you make any vital decisions. Wow. And so there's, history is strewn with references to breath, right? You look at any of the religious texts, any of the old texts, breath is mentioned, but it's synonymous with spirit, right? So this is where this bridging between body and mind comes into it. If we get into the philosophical side, you can see just behind me some of the bookshelves. You probably can't see on the book. We have dozens of books on breathing, because whenever I want to immerse myself in something, I want to understand what were the yogis saying about it, what were the Chinese saying about it, what are the Taoists saying about it, where are all that, and all of them have this reference to breath being synonymous with spirit. And this comes down to us, kind of tying it back to what you were just saying there, James, about communication. The reason when I'm working with these COs is that we do work on regulation is because your nervous system will affect other people's nervous systems around you. The calmest person in the room will always be the person that everyone turns to in a leadership role, because they'll be like, what do we do? What's the plan? Right. And if anyone is ever in a room and they get asked that by a group of people, just know you're the most regulated person in that room at that time, because humans naturally will gravitate towards that aspect of a human. And it is not it's not a spoken thing. It's an energetic. It's an energetic thing, right? It's people just know. They just know when they're around somebody who has got time and measure. I know this might be an unpopular one, and I only pick this person because they're on the world stage at the moment. But if you do listen to, say, someone like Donald Trump when he speaks, you'll notice that people pick on his tone and his tempo, and that he is definitely timing the way that he breathes, the way that he delivers things, and love him or not like him, or don't like what he says or don't like what he says. The reason he has influence is because of his demeanor, because of his nervous system, right? Even after he got shot at, right? This is why people have rallied around people like him, is because they understand that their tone, their tempo, their nervous system, that's what attracts people. It's nothing else. And people can see through all the behavior stuff, right? Like maybe there's unpopular things that he says, and again, I only use him. I know it's controversial and whatever else, but I use that as an example because that will answer the question for a lot of people as to why him, right? Like why? And you will start to notice that about people that you're around that have that, instinctively understand that. They may know it and practice it, but it's often an instinctive thing.
Shane, that's super interesting too. And thank you for sharing that. And coming back to, Sun Tzu in The Art of War and the 8 breaths, I'm fascinated by that because right when you were talking about that, I instantly thought of a couple of other people. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, where I don't remember the exact quote. I tried to pull it up here, but I think it's between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power, and that's our freedom. And then I'm thinking of, Carolyn Leaf, Dr. Carolyn Leaf. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she has a whole project that she's worked on called Neurocycle. And there's a whole bunch to that too. Essentially, part of my take home with Dr. Leaf's work is when you get a stimulus, when you get triggered, just take a breath. Like take a breath or two. Don't respond right away. Like breathe through it. And then your whatever comes out of your mouth next is going to be better than if you just respond quickly. And I'm hearing that and seeing that played out on the world stage, like you said, with various leaders. And I think some leaders are better at it than others, and I think that, like you said, like him or not, I think Trump's a master at this. I mean, is it intentional? Is it just innate to him? I don't know. Probably a little bit of both, right? So there's that. So I just wanted to really say yes. And then as far as like the organic nature of doing that, I personally suffer with that's a bad way to say it. My parents dealt me some great genes to deal with. One of them is propensity toward cardiometabolic syndrome, cardiovascular diseases, things like that. I lost both my father and my brother to sudden cardiac death last year. And we can wax poetic about reasons why. Ultimately, what I'm learning is for myself is that, and this, I'm going to use a bad word, and then I'm going to ask you a question. The bad word is the older I get, the more I have to learn dominance. And I say that, and it can be off-putting to people. And I ask them why it's off-putting, and they have a lot of reasons. And then I say, well, the dominance I'm learning is actually dominating myself and dominating my regulation, and dominating that space so that I can own that space between trigger and response. And I can now see how breath work plays in there. Thank you for that. I'm going to add to that one thing, or just an idea and a question. Somewhere you said, where is it? State of dependent learning, right, and trauma-informed breathing. And we were kind of in that area. And basically we were saying that we have some trauma and then we can get locked in that state, and it can be a physiological state, it can be a breathing state, but there's memory there. It's almost like a metabolic memory or a breathing memory. And I think about what happened, what has happened. I mean, I'm not trying to point to one incident. We've had a lot of incidents happen in the United States in a very short amount of time here recently. One of them, of course, is the Charlie Kirk execution, public execution. That some people were there witnessing it in person. I can't imagine the trauma that they went through, but really, I mean, it was the shot heard around the world. Number two, I mean, we all witnessed someone murdered, executed in front of us, agree with them, disagree with them. I mean, it was just a journalist with an opinion that was killed. And I started thinking about, when we were in the green room, we were saying things like, when we're under stress, it brings out the worst and the best in us. And I wrote down, and right now our country's under a lot of stress. And here's my question. As a stress expert, what are you observing about us Americans?
This is a deep issue because I'm married to an American. I have two daughters who are American citizens. So it's very close to home for me. This is going to go off topic. I look, couple of things. I love America. I love going there. I love the spirit of entrepreneurship. Being in business myself, I love it. I love Americans for that reason. I think that everything moves in cycles. I think that when you swing so far to an extreme, that eventually you're going to swing back. So I tell my kids, and quite often my friends that live in the US as well, is that I believe that things will get better around the world, especially. We're not that far behind you guys, right? We have a lot of issues here in politics that are very similar to what you're seeing over there. Very extreme behaviors that are coming in. Where it kind of, I think this kind of nails the essence of the work that we do when it comes to stress, right? And we've mentioned this word a couple of times, Jason, in what we're talking about, and I'll kind of tie this in where it comes back to your question. This idea of a pause, right? Of a pause comes into it, and if you come right down into the cellular sense and the sense of what I mentioned before in the breathing reflex, where the CO2 and oxygen gets balanced in your body in the reflex is the pause that happens after your exhale. So when you finish an exhale, there is a tiny little transition. Imagine a ball bouncing. That's what the pause is like. It's not a stop. It's not a hold. It's just this little transition. Now, when that pause is left to do its natural thing, that's where it balances your oxygen and CO2, and therefore you get the right amount of oxygen delivered to every cell in your body. We get in the way of that pause. If we zoom out to what we were just talking about in response versus reaction, it's a pause. The pause is the key aspect to it. So you quite often hear, I hear this stuff in philosophical things all the time. It's the pause in between the notes in the music that makes the music great, right? Like this is something that I think as humans in the fast-paced world that we're in, we forget about taking a pause. And I think what's just happened recently in the US has caused a pause. This has caused a massive pause for people to stop and go, what the hell just happened? What is going on? And do we all need to stop, pause, and reflect on where things are going? It's also drawn out a lot of the people that you see that have absolute zero empathy, that think it is okay for someone to be assassinated. There was something that shocked me the other day. They did a poll in the US, and I won't get the numbers right, but you can go and look it up. And they asked, they did a poll between conservatives and liberals, and they asked, is it okay to commit violence against your political opponents? The extreme liberal side said it was 6 times more likely. They said it was okay to do that, right? 6 times more likely than the conservative side. Now, that has really got to give everybody pause to think that there is a large percentage of people in the US that think it is okay for someone to have violence committed against them, right? Okay, like literally they're like, yes, they should be killed, or yes, they should be harmed. So this whole idea about pausing, I think this is where it really comes in. And we're talking about pausing in the societal sense to reflect, but you can really bring that all the way back down to this idea that in your personal, in your body, in your breathing cycle, it's that pause that is the thing that nourishes the system, really. And so I think taking more pauses, and I think that I personally think that in the US, this is although someone had to die for it, and it's a very powerful kind of reflection on that, I think that this is going to create a pause. And I have faith that will create something different there. It'll shift the direction that the country, and in fact the world, like you said, there's a lot of outpouring around the world for this. This is a pretty public event, and I think that's where I quite often look at things that they're fractals of everything, which is why I linked it to that pause. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, and thank you so much for that. And then I'm going to pass it over to James too. I just wanted to say that poll, I believe that you're referring to, is by YouGov, who did the poll. It was a very large poll, and YouGov tries to be, as much as anybody can be, nonpartisan, moderate. Probably most media, although you wouldn't see this in the US, but a lot of media leans, maybe just a little conservative just by the nature of the beast. I mean, I'm a journalist. I've got a graduate degree in journalism, and James is a journalist. And I mean, just journalism in general tends to be, even though you wouldn't note it in the United States, tends to be a little bit more conservative, but they did try to have a nonpartisan, and that's exactly what the finding was. So I'll pass it over to James and I'll plant a seed too. I just wonder, it's not really a question. I just wonder if the cognitive dissonance because I talk to everybody. I mean, I try to also be nonpartisan and stay in the middle and hear everybody's viewpoints, and allow my mind to be changed. I have strong opinions, but I'm also open to being wrong. When I bring up things like what you just said, there's a whole bunch of cognitive dissonance. Like, no way, my side can't think that way, and it's an angry response. And again, it's reaction rather than a response, right? It's just very interesting. I was just on the phone, unrelated to this topic, but with our daughter, and I said she had a very strong opinion on something unrelated to this, evolutionary biology, to be honest, is what we're talking about. And I said, "Are you willing to have yourself to be wrong? Are you open enough with your strong beliefs to be wrong?" And it took about an hour of a conversation, and she finally said, "You know what? I realize I'm fighting you on this because I'm not sure I am willing to be wrong." And she said, "I'm going to have to really think about that." And I just wonder about America in general. I mean, my observation about us is that I don't think we're willing to be wrong. I think that anyway, that's just my opinion. Anyway, no question there. James, I'm going to pass it right over to you.
Yeah. As I'm listening to you guys go back and forth about the Kirk situation and the Sun Tzu, I think that's not right how you say
You're
it.
right.
But
I don't think I even say his name right, James, so it's all good.
I'm willing to be wrong. There you go.
There's a first time for everything.
I step right in line. I'm willing to be wrong with how I say things from time to time too. That's why Jason might not even know this, but Shane, as soon as I got out of college, I went and got the big boy job, and I worked for a newspaper. And my background's in journalism, as he said. And I just never really agreed with the narrative that the mainstream media put out. And listening to this conversation, I'm still not sure that I agree with the narrative that our media is putting out. But I do like what you guys both said about hold your breath, or do the breath work, 8 breaths before you make any type of moves. And I think if that we could just instill that into the framework of all people moving forward, there'd be a lot more self-reflection. There'd be a lot more taking a pause, like you said, to see if somebody might be right before we jump in. And there might be a little bit of chance for us to learn from each other at that point, because we have oxygen going to the brain, CO2. And I think that that's really what happens with a lot of these types of knee-jerk reactions and emotional explosions, is people just don't give themselves enough time to absorb information before they make a response. And I just wanted to like break it down to something just trivial. Like every once in a while, I mean, I played sports for a long time. You know, when you breathe right, you perform better. If you hold your breath and you're trying to throw a Frisbee, for instance, the Frisbee goes way offline. But if you breathe and you exhale before you throw the Frisbee goes where it's supposed to go. So even in performance of the biomechanics of how we do something are golfing. Some people like golf. And if you hold your breath when you swing a golf club, the ball freaking rockets over out of bounds. But if you breathe and you hit, the ball trajectory goes to where you want it to go. So it's not just our emotional resonance with the way that we respond to something, but it's our physical response to how we want something to actually happen. And I really believe that the more regulated we are, like I said earlier, the issues are in the tissues. And if you hold your breath, you don't get good performance on anything. And you got to give yourself a time to take that break and to take that pause in order to get a good response to something. And I do have a question on top of that. You were talking about earlier that this might not be popular to say this stuff to some breathwork circles, but what's the biggest misconception that you see in breathwork space that could actually be harmful to people?
Yeah, I think it really does come down to that idea that they mistake the mechanical aspect of breathing for respiration, or they pay no attention to respiration. So meaning that a lot of the breathwork space is centered around surface stuff like the big cathartic experience, you know, come and, you know, have this big explosion of catharsis and cry, and that will solve your problems, right? It's, it couldn't be further from the truth, really. And so with no consideration of, respiration, and then how that is going to affect behavior, how that's going to affect the dysregulation that someone may or may not already have, or create, you know, this idea that you swap one problem for another. You already have dysregulation, so you swap it for another breathing method that then causes a different dysregulation, or you're trying to shift your state, and you're trying to shift things in your body, and you do it in a negative way that, you know, externalizes in something else, some other issue. So I think we see this a lot, James, and this is a really great question, because this is literally the work that we're doing right now, is to try and bring awareness around this and unwind it. And quite often what we find is, you know, it's performative. A lot of breath work these days is performative. It's a performance. It's not a, you know, it's not steeped in this scientific aspect of understanding that there's these different components that come with dealing with this, and not respecting the, I guess, the powerful effects that it has at a cellular level, and a mental and emotional level, and a spiritual level, in fact, of the body, which, you know, and there's just, I find that, you know, I'm trying to pick my words carefully here. I will say it's ignorance. So it's ignorance to understanding that breathing has this huge, powerful effect on the whole organism, right? And then just thinking, oh, well, you know, no, we're just going to go and do this thing, because quite often I find, James, that people that come into the space, they're doing the breath work with people for some self-satisfaction. I did that. I'm the, you know, you'll come to me for the healing. And as a healer, as someone who wants to see people get better, you need to understand, you need to give over that whole aspect of the healing, that the person needs to heal themselves. The person, they're the biggest determining factor in someone getting better, is that they believe they can get better, and they're actually the one that is doing the healing.
Can I jump back in?
Yeah.
So in the world I come from, we talk about the three stressors: physical, chemical, or emotional. And when you start to decode these things and you start talking about getting people too far ahead of their game, really they have to deal with the emotional constipation before that they can go to that next layer of innate intelligence, which is learning how to breathe effectively through whatever emotional issue they're dealing with, or chemical stress that they're dealing with, or the thoughts, traumas, and toxins. Whatever bad thoughts they have to do the work in order to find how to process that before they could become a world-class breather. You have to deal with the things that are underneath the surface and not think that you're going to be their guru and just teach them how to do some breath work and it's going to solve all the issues. So it's a multi-layered system. Like they should have to graduate through the coursework of self-regulating their emotional state before they can be accepted into a breathing course. And I think that that's what you're saying is you do more harm by not correcting the first things first to get to the second thing second, or the third thing third. So we really have to do some work on the entire ecosystem inside that person before we think that we're going to send them to a weekend boot camp and teach them how to do some box breathing.
Yeah, it's such a lacking part of everything that we do. And quite often, I mean, I'm a bit blunt about it. I often just call it maturity, right? Like if you're not mature enough to forego your own wants and needs when it comes to working with somebody, then you'll probably hinder their progress rather than helping them, because you're not mature enough to hold yourself back from needing to be the person who heals them. I need the adulation. I need to be the person that they had that big cathartic release and that spiritual experience, right? And I think this is probably one of the biggest things that holds people back from effectively applying breathing work, and I will say breath work as well, even though, like I said to you, that, we kind of are not in that breath work world as such. We came from there, but that is probably, I think when we do our teaching or when we work with our students or work with anybody, that is probably one of the most elusive parts of the training, and probably one of the hardest parts for people to grasp, is that maturity to understand actually how healing gets applied with people in this sense. It goes for it goes for the work that you guys do in chiropractic. It goes for the work in allopathic medicine, all of that. And this is, I think, Jason and I have had this discussion before. Like, I remember us talking about this years ago when we're going through COVID, right? And just understanding how poor the application of that part of healing is now in modern medicine, right? Where it's just pills and potions and
lotions.
Yeah, exactly. And no, nothing about the human, nothing about bed. Like I'll quite often say to people, your bedside manner will have such an effect on the person you're working with. And people quite often, they don't get that. They're like, well, what do you mean by that? I'm like, the way that you are, like the way that you present, how you, your demeanor, like how you show up is going to matter a lot for whether that person is going to feel like, oh, you've got me. And I can, quite often, they'll express things to you, right? And a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, mental and emotional, if they're able to get something off their chest, right, quite often that will be the healing that they need, and they'll quite
That's
often
all they need.
Overcome something there, and all of a sudden their breathing mechanism frees up. All of a sudden they're not having these issues as much, right?
And panic attacks.
Exactly, and it's not a placebo. In a sense, it is actually literally that you've lifted the mental and emotional weight by being receptive.
It's a conscious awareness.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too. And I mean, we talked about pills, potions, and lotions and the lack of bedside mannerism, a couple of things here. I don't know if you guys have seen, but they've done some pretty larger studies now looking at, I don't know what the word is, but it's that bedside mannerism. It's that empathy that you feel from your provider. And right. They've done a lot of studies now looking at AI, and the AI models, the LLM AI models that we have, tend to score higher with people feeling that they're listened to more, they're understood more, and the robot that's not real. I mean, let's remember that these are not real things. These are just LLMs. Has more empathy than the doctor that they go to see at the clinic or the hospital. And I think that speaks volumes about, at least in America, where we are with our healthcare system. James has something. Go ahead. And then I have something to share still.
I just think it's just a layer of like us getting to know our guests behind the scenes and have a few laughs before we go out and do an interview with them. And you build some common ground with them and you acknowledge them and you have a little bit of fun before you go and talk about what's really serious in the world. And I think that we are just a microcosm of the major. Like if we all spent enough time to host a podcast and to talk to interesting people and to share their stories and shine a spotlight on what makes them incredible, we'd get a lot of answers for the questions that people have in the world. And really that's a driving force behind formats like this is we do take the pause. We do self-regulate to ask the deeper questions. And we do give an expose style report to people that pay attention as to what some solutions are that might be able to help them. And I think that that's really effective journalism. That's really effective communication. That's really effective regulation when it comes to delivering a message that matters to more people. And honestly, man, most people just don't know where to go or who to trust. So that's what we're doing here is we're bonding to a culture of people that are looking for answers. They just don't know where to go for them. So by us bringing on experts like Shane and yourself, Dr. Jason, we now give a template to people to say, yeah, that makes sense. I want to listen to more of this because I know they're going to talk to somebody else about, heart health. I know they're going to talk to somebody else about hypnotherapy. I know they're going to talk to somebody else about, how to clean up our water and how to have healthy births. Now we have a trusted platform because we're doing exactly what you're saying. We have bedside manner that builds curiosity and builds community.
Yes. Amen to all that. And thank you for bringing it right back to me. I appreciate that. The one thing that I'll say about the thread of guests that we've had on, and I know everyone's like, when are your shows getting released? They're coming. They're coming.
I even want to know.
We all want to know, production company. But anyway, that all said, the thread that I've seen with I think all of our conversations, is that these issues of getting better faster are multifactorial. They're easy, they're simple, but not necessarily easy. There's a lot of moving pieces. It's not a one-trick pony. I mean, Shane's not coming in here and saying like, you know what, everything's wrong with everybody. Just do some box breathing and you're gonna be okay. I mean, it's complex. I mean, we see that in everybody that we've talked to. And I recall back to when our local, hospital, I don't know if it still is, but at the time it was the largest teaching hospital in the United States. So very well-funded, very large. And I was on a committee that was, some integrative medicine committee. And they had everything that you could imagine sitting at a table, right? A representative of everything that you could imagine. Hypnosis, I'm sure breathwork was there, acupuncture, chiropractic, natural medicine. I mean, I don't know. Just fill in the blank. And this is the way it worked. They would bring in a case and we would do rounds on this case. And they would say, what do you think that we need holistic pharmacist? And they're like, oh, that person needs St. John's wort. What do you think that we need acupuncture? It's like, well, no, they need acupuncture. I mean, and literally it was like the one thing. And they'd get it to me. And this is why I didn't last on the board. They would get to me and I'm like, I don't even know what's going on with the person. I'm like, you said like 38-year-old woman with PMS. I'm like, what's going on? Like, I don't know really anything more than what you just shared. I mean, what's the complexity of the case? Where's her psychology? What are the 3 T's, the traumas, toxins, thoughts that she's dealing with? I had a lot more questions and I never gave an answer. And that whole board got disbanded shortly after I was belligerent because it's complex. There is not a simple answer. And in America, at least, we're always looking for what's the magic bullet and more specifically, what's the magic pill, right? Because in the end of these conversations, they would always go with what the holistic pharmacist would say. Like, oh, let's just do that pill and see what happens. And I'm like, it's not going to work. And then they'd be like, we tried St. John's wort for depression or anxiety or sleep or fill in the blank and it didn't work. And I'm like, of course it didn't work. I mean, you can't, it's not one thing. It's a complex thing. So I appreciate that for sure. Yeah. I also wanted to share, I promised him I would say this. I have a very good friend named Graham, who is ex-military, special forces. After that, paramilitary, private contract work. And I asked him specifically, I said, what did you do to stay calm in those situations? He said, I'm going to read what he texted me to say. Awesome. He said, huh? Oh, wait. I usually just gave a battle cry and barged in shooting. I chased a flashbang once or twice too. And so anyway, I thought that was really, interesting that, you're over there training Australian Navy SEALs, breathe, calm, pause, gather. And he's just like, just shoot and go. So anyway.
Well, one thing I will say about that, Jason, is this is kind of a little bit of a sidebar. The really interesting experience being in that world, right? Because in the world of, and this will fold back into what your friend just said there, in that world of warriors or special forces, there's two very distinct type of people. There's the consummate professional, absolute professional soldier, that's just down the line, everything. And then there is the psychopath, right? And so you need both. And so
I know which one my friend is. I'm just
right. And I say this I don't say this in a bad way, but I say the people who are the psychopathic, crazy people, they need somewhere to channel energy, whether it's rage or whether it's whatever. And the mix of those two different types of personalities, especially in the male sense of the alpha male, which is who you want in those positions to be guarding the gates, right? Like there's no secret about this. They keep each other in check. And so it does not surprise me that, and I'm not calling your friend a psychopath. That's not what I'm saying. But there is still with training, there is still a level of just going with your gut that is effective, because the mind is not quite often always in control of those things and should not be in control of those decisions. That's why the training is so precise. That's why the training is so arduous. That's why it is like that, is because it is by the numbers. And so I can relate to what he's saying. And it's not, trust me, not everyone's sitting there in the Zen position going, oh, we're all these, quiet spirited warriors. No, you have a complete mix, but it's the grouping of those type of people that creates a cohesive unit that is able to do the impossible, things that they're able to do in those units. And that's really what it comes down to.
Did you get enough closure on that one, Jay?
I did. Yeah. He said, after I say that, after you gave your observation, and I'm going to quote again. He said, "Of course he will know that I'm joking." I don't know if all of them from being a psychopath or not. I've known this man since I was 14.
I'm talking about extremes, right? I'm talking about extremes, and there's everyone in between there. Yeah. So, but just to kind of illustrate, there is absolutely those elements in those. So
no, I appreciate that. Yeah. I asked him one time what his skill set was. And like, now that he's retired, and he's in his 5th decade of life and he's retired, and he's like, I don't know that I have a marketable skill set. I can infiltrate otherwise impenetrable areas and disappear people that can otherwise be disappeared. He's like, I'm not sure what to do with that. What he does now is he goes around and buys antiques and refurbishes antiques. And that's his Zen moment for fun. But no, James, I know you had something to comment. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I just want to go back to Shane's expertise in this whole breathwork world and the breathing world, whatever we want to call it. And obviously we were talking about when people get into a program that seems to be largely unregulated, maybe people that aren't as good or fundamental or foundational as you. I know people are going to be watching this and listen to this, like thousands and thousands and thousands of downloads. They're curious. They're like, these guys are really good. They're talking about a lot of awesome stuff, but how do I find somebody that's qualified? How do I find somebody that is a resource that I can trust to make sure that I'm going the right pathway? How do people find somebody like you?
It's a great question.
Well, they find us through our website, of course. So that's the most obvious answer. The Online Breathing Academy. That's where I think, to answer your question, that there's a really interesting. We get this a lot from people. Breathwork in and of itself, right, James, is not a regulated industry. Okay, this is one of the first. This is kind of one of the first things to kind of bring up, because we get that often. Well, where do I go? It is difficult. It is the Wild West still, right? Like, it is still there, and we have this conversation with people all the time, which is why we did develop the training that we developed. We developed the training that we have because it blends, or its core message, I guess, is this message of breathing is a behavior and you do need to address that prior to doing anything else. Now, caveat on this, and I want to clear this up too. It's not that I don't believe circular breathing and the catharsism and the spiritual experience you get from it is bad. No, not at all. We still will have people do those sessions. I still run those sessions. It's just that you need to look at it through that lens of respiration and behavior so that someone understands when they are, for lack of a better word, diagnosing or assessing somebody before they put them through one of those breathwork sessions, that people understand where is home for them in their breathing. How do I find my breathing mechanism? What does it mean to actually sit? And so quite often the core of our teaching is to teach people how to observe their reflex in their breathing. And it's described in a really simple way. And that is, if you imagine the shape of a triangle, that is the way that your breath naturally flows. You always begin at the exhale, right? Because we find that that's an important point for the down regulation. There's a transition stage as you shift from exhale to inhale. You breathe straight all the way to the top of the inhale and you'll transition straight into the exhale. And it's the pause that's important. This is what we teach everybody. Once you understand that that's where home is, whenever you're doing a breathwork session or you feel like you're out of control or heading towards the panic feeling or whatever the dysregulation in any sense, is that you can always come back to home by focusing on that little transition between your exhale and your inhale. I hope that answered your question, James.
Will you do that? Will you do that exercise in real time with Dr. Jason and me?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, good.
For sure. So always, if you're driving, never close your eyes. You can do this exercise while you're driving, but if you're operating machinery or driving, just caveat on that. You don't want to do that because you want to relax, right? This is key essential. So if you guys sit, wherever you are, if you can get your feet on the ground, great. If you can get a little bit of space between your ribs and your hips, even better where you are. Chin slightly down and relax your shoulders. So you can go ahead and close your eyes. And the first thing that you want to do is just notice your breathing cycle. Nothing to do. There will be this strong tendency to try and control that. And we'll get back to that later around, this brings us back into the societal part, right? The tendency, the need to try and control. Just observe your breathing for the moment. And then in your mind, imagine the shape of a triangle. So you're not trying to put your breath into the shape of the triangle. You're just imagining the shape of a triangle. So you go from one corner of the triangle as you inhale up to the top. You let the breath go all the way down to the other corner. Let the exhale complete, and you'll just notice that there's a little transition that happens, and imagine that bouncing ball. So you bounce from the exhale into the inhale. Now, what you might find is that the body wants to sigh or wants to yawn. And this is a natural effect that happens when you are actually starting to, in some sense, control your breathing, because just focusing on it tends to have you want to try and control your breathing. Let the natural processes happen. So let the sighs happen, let the yawns happen, and just continue to settle. Now, a simple way to think about this is you want to follow behind your breath and observe what it does. So it's guiding you around that triangle. You're going in, out, and you're transitioning on that pause. And we're going to do something here so that you get an idea of what the pause is or how it is. After your next exhale, hold the pause and notice what the feelings are like as you hold that pause. Maybe you hold it for 5 or 10 seconds. So as soon as you've completed the exhale, no force on it, hold the pause and then let it go and return. Just let it go and let it go back around the triangle. When you hold that pause, if you're ever in a state where you feel dysregulated or you feel panic, when you hold that pause temporarily held will increase the amount of CO2. So you can have a little bit of an intervention to correct that, right? Now, for this final 20 seconds, see if you can just completely observe your breath. Relax the shoulders, relax your face, relax your hands. What you'll notice is you want your breath to be quiet and small. So the triangles are just quiet and small. When they're quiet and small, this will be you maintaining the right amount of CO2, therefore getting more oxygen into the body. Okay, and then when you're ready, just take a sigh of relief. You can open your eyes and just come out.
Wow, that was interesting. Especially talking about box breathing. and all these different techniques. I remember now, thank you for reminding me, you and I met pre-pandemic in Austin, Texas at a mastermind with our good friend, Alex Sharfin, who we all love. And I remember asking you questions like, what do you do? And you're like, I teach people to breathe. I'm like, you can do that for a living? You're like, yeah, I do well. And I was like, wow, that's neat. But I remember you talking about the triangular structure of the breath. I forgot about it, to be honest, because I just forgot. But my observation was when I'm breathing, it is triangular. It's an up, it's a down, and then it's a little pause. It's like a bounce with the ball, then it's up and it's down, and it's a little bounce with the ball. And it feels very natural to think about it as a triangle for me. It doesn't feel natural to take the breath and hold it and then slow exhale and then, like a quadrangle or whatever that, I don't even know what shape that would be. But I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you reminding me of what you taught me in like 2018 or something. So I appreciate remembering that.
We teach 3 shapes in the breathing, really is the all mechanical breathing. Every breathing method can be contained in those 3 Platonic shapes, a circle, square, and a triangle. And James, the box breathing is just a square breathing. The reason box breathing is taught to people is because you're controlling every aspect of the breath. Therefore, you're increasing CO2. So if you ever get in a high pressure situation and you really need to raise CO2 quickly, you're pausing at the top and the bottom, which gives you 2 opportunities in the breath cycle to raise CO2. That's why box breathing is still in the zeitgeist. It's still being taught. That's the reason why, because you have those 2 opportunities. Natural breathing, as Jason just mentioned, as we pointed out, is represented by the triangle, and circular breathing is represented by the negative aspects of breathing, right? And we often call it negative practice. So how we'll often, we tell people all the time this is the way we teach and what we've done. We've simplified it so much because that's the way, in essence, the way I see it. Quite often we'll say to people, if you suffer from panic attacks, if you suffer from any kind of dysregulated breathing that externalizes some kind of problem, quite often you'll be doing it in a circular pattern, meaning there's no gaps, no pauses, which lowers the CO2, which puts you in that state. So what we'll often get people to do is we'll get them to circular breathe and go, show us how you do it. Show us how you do the panic state. Show us what you do. And people go, what do you mean? Show me show us how you do your anger. Show us how you do your panic. Show us how you do it. And they're like, I don't get it. You get them to do it. They go, oh my God, this is how I breathe when I'm feeling X, fill in the blank. You then get them to revert to triangular breathing and focus on the little pause and understand that this is home. You get them to go back to the circular breathing. You take them back. It's a hormetic process, right? It's the poison. The poison is the cure. It's just the dose that really is the key to it, right? And so you cycle them on and off between these 2. Quite often people will go, wow, I didn't realize that I was doing this, right? That I have a hand in it. I can intervene in it. And this quite often solves a lot of the issues that people have. I mean, of course, behaviors grow back. They're like tentacles, right? We know when they get under pressure, they might go back to it. But at least they now have an awareness. We have a framework. It's called AIR, right? And it's awareness, intervention, and regulation. That's the framework that we teach in what we do. And this is the key aspect to people getting better through understanding their breathing mechanism. So it's we've simplified most everything that we can. It's my nature. I love taking complex things and simplifying them and being able to communicate them because I believe that it's effective in people being able to take that and integrate it into what they do. A lot of the clients that we have are already chiros, they're physios, they're doctors, and they want to integrate a method of breathing that has a profound effect on people. And we always say to them, it is a tool. It is not the panacea, right? It is a way of understanding how lots of other systems are linked in the body through what we discussed at the start, through the cellular level, through the oxygen delivery. More oxygen, less tension, less inflammation, better flow through the body. All of that stuff folds in. And so this AIR framework, the first step is being aware that you're actually doing something in your breathing that is dysregulating you. The next thing is intervening with those with one of those different shapes, right? And understanding how they all function. And the step after that is that you understand how to regulate yourself.
Well, you uncovered a lot of stuff there for me, and you could probably tell Jason and I when we were doing the breathing technique for the minute we were doing it, our physiology shifted. I yawned 3 times. There was a massive release for me. I feel like refreshed coming back, and I feel like I could talk to you for another, 2 hours. But I have like 4 more topics, man, but just to follow up to that stance we were just on. How long does it take for someone to become effective at their learned techniques? Like you're talking about the technique now. Like if I wanted to be like a black belt in breathing techniques and I wanted to go through your coursework, how long does it take for me to become like the man with understanding my breathing regulation and how to implement it at a snap of a finger?
That's a really good question, James. And there's no definitive answer to that. The first thing I would say is there is no techniques, right? Like we do not, the idea of giving you the shapes is so that you can understand your breathing mechanics, something you naturally do, and utilize the natural mechanism that your body already has, right? Recognizing the breathing reflex, I think, is one of the simplest but most elusive parts of what we do. And it's why we start. We start with the end in mind, right? When people come to us, I always say to them, we're going to teach you the most profound thing that you can do in your breathing. And it's like, you hear the old saying about the gurus say, if I teach you this technique, I have to kill you because it's such a guarded technique. Well, yeah, literally, this is what it is. The observation of your breathing is such a simple thing, yet there is so much richness in understanding how to actually and literally not interfere in the natural process of what you do, how to forego control, how to observe something without the tendency or the need to try and intervene in it. And this goes right out into the societal aspect that we're talking about. When you can truly observe your breathing, James, that is probably the ultimate key to it, because from that foundation, you understand that any quote unquote technique that you apply to your breathing, you always understand where home is. You always understand where you need to return to after you've used the breathing technique for whatever it is that you want to do, right? Like, yes, you're going to get nervous when you present something. If you go up on stage and there's 1,000 people in the crowd, you're going to give an address. You're going to get nervous. I don't think there's anyone on the planet that wouldn't. Would you apply a technique like a box breathing or a triangular breathing with holding the pause in that instance? Absolutely, because what that will do is it will help you gain control of your nervous system. It will help you increase CO2, which will then relax the nervous system even more, which will help you retain more oxygen, which will help you think better, deliver, have a more timed tempo, right? So the question about mastering a technique is not so much mastering an intervention, right? The intervention part. So the what you do, it's mastering that ability to observe and understand and trust that you have a mechanism that is regulating you 24/7, every second, every breath. We take, that 20,000 breaths a day. That's 20,000 opportunities for you to be in balance, for you to achieve homeostasis. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
It does. And Jason, did you want to jump back in?
Boy, I'll tell you what, like this, we always get to this point in the interview and I'm like, God, we're just getting started. Like every time I'm like, now there's like James said, there's like 14 more topics. I mean, I had on my agenda today, and I don't want to throw a name down, but I've been fascinated with this guy's work, Konstantin. I don't know how to say his last name, Butekyo. Russian physiologist, physician, and breathwork, and specifically fascinated with it's basically triangle breathing. When I really look at it, it's inhale. It's controlled triangle breathing. I think it's inhale for 4, exhale for 7, and then hold that bottom in for 8 seconds. I think is the we've studied all the different breathing techniques, and really Butenko's method is just about retaining more CO2. Yeah, it's CO2. And what's interesting about that in my realm, I work with people with mast cell and histamine intolerance, and it's literally one of the best things that we can do. People are like, oh, the histamine, it's out of control, my mast cell. And I'm like, are you doing breathing? And I don't even know what I other than what I just shared with you. We can dive more into it, but even that, like taking breath application to specific diagnoses, I think is really an interesting, piece of work.
It's really a key, Jason, really that I'll just, sorry, jump in there, but really the key to that, it is really, really simple, right? It's a question. There's two things. One, it is more oxygen to your cells is going to improve any pathology, right? Like anything, right? If your cells are starving of oxygen, you raise the oxygen level and you're going to get better, right? The second thing is reducing tension and stress, right? In any sickness, in anybody who is ill, who is unwell, if you can raise their vibration, and literally you are raising their vibration by having them retain more oxygen, by retaining the better level of CO2, they are going to get better, right? So the chemical part is an externality of the lack of oxygen. It's your body trying to compensate. Our body is a compensatory mechanism, right? So that's the way I kind of look at that in a sense.
And when I look at things like mast cell and histamine, I mean, those in my world, this isn't in traditional medicine, but in my world, those are defense mechanisms. It's your body feeling under threat. It's not in a safe space. And so what does the immune system do? It mobilizes mast cells and releases a bunch of histamine, foreign invader, we got to take care of something. And it's really the military police of our body, our immune system coming in. And again, why? Because the body's in fear. The body doesn't feel safe. And again, what do we need for that? We need tissue saturation with oxygen. I mean, Shane, it makes so much sense, other sub things. Why isn't this taught in medical school? Like, what's going on?
I think it's too simple. I think the issue that we have in our, in anything we do these days is this idea that things have to be complex. And I think that I think we have perverse incentives was my next comment, James. I think we have perverse incentives built up around complex things where the knowledge is guarded by very few people. And I think that this is just too simple. It's
free energy. What you're doing for people here, Shane, is you're giving people free energy.
Yes.
That's always frowned upon because we have to regulate energy.
Well, it does fold into that issue that we have in our society right now, which is the, in the consumer world is that planned obsolescence, where that you have to build something that breaks so that you can sell the next thing. In your world, and I guess in mine, but in the medical world, you don't want to cure someone.
Right.
Well, there's no money in helping people.
Yes.
I want to curve into another pathway if we can. How much time do we have?
Quite frankly, we're over time. I'll be real honest with you. So here's what I'm feeling. I don't want to take your question away, but I feel that we could push pause and take a breath. And then I think that we should have Shane back on for round 2. That's what I think. If you're okay with that, James. I don't want to cut you off. I know you have questions, but maybe just a closing question, and then we'll wrap up this interview, and then we'll have Shane back on.
Yeah. Okay.
I know it's not what we want, but I think that's the best.
Yes. And
it's a good technique.
Fight fire with fire. Right. I have to ask these questions before we end. Machine-induced breathing, like a CPAP machine or hyperbaric chamber.
Yeah.
Like, can we touch on those topics and then we'll call it a day and then we'll come back for round 2?
Yeah. With the CPAP, James, really interesting. I'll go further into this than most people will, right? Like atrophy in the structures is the first thing, right? It's the reason people need CPAP machines is the atrophy in the muscle tone in the neck, and you get an organic obstruction, right? Like, the back of the throat closes over. Congestion sometimes is the issue. I'll take it even further. There's a thing that happens quite often with people that get sick, and this might sound morbid, but I kind of I feel really strongly about this, and that is they lose the affinity to breathe. They literally very, very slowly give up on life. Yes. And quite often you will often find behind people that are having those issues is this, I guess, existential death urge that's that's driving behind it. And I believe that physically it causes that, the shutting down of the atrophy of the muscles of the breathing mechanism, the shutting down of the affinity to breathe, and they just breathe less, and they just do that over a long period of time, and eventually they expire. I mean, I know that sounds morbid, but that is literally the pathway that it takes.
That's why I asked you, because I wanted to get that response. And hyperbaric, that's also a forced system that's creating something else going on. A shift inside of the regulation of breath.
Yeah, well, really, that's a story of blood. That's a story of being able to produce more red blood cells, right? Like, at certain pressures, the body, if you go to altitude, for example, there's a difference in the gases, which then forces the body to produce more red blood cells, right? Because it needs to be able to balance the gas. That's why altitude training is sought after by athletes. The hyperbaric chamber, what it is doing is it's producing altitude training at sea level. That's I mean, there's a whole lot of technical stuff that you could go into. I'm not that much across the intricacies of hyperbaric chambers, but that's my understanding of.
Just a quick question, and then close us out, and then I'll close us out. But the last closing question, and it's not a question, it's more of an ask. Share with our audience a success story you've had with people. Just one. Just somebody that came into your world, and it might give people some hope out there.
We've had many different people come for many different reasons, but I do. I once had a dad. Well, daddy was having issues with his son. He came for breathing, really, because he was, waking up at night, not sleeping well, a candidate that was going towards having the CPAP machine. And we have we didn't even get into this. We can probably get into this on the next time we talk. We have a device called a capnometer, which measures end-tidal CO2, and it's been adapted for behavioral learning.
Love it. I love it.
Very, very interesting machine, like super interesting. I call it a lie detector. You can put the capnometer on somebody and you can ask them personal questions about things. I had a discussion about his relationship with his son, different things, and you watch his CO2 drop on certain things, and would go into hypercapnia, would go into panic states or anger states, and you could see it. And he was actually able to visually register that, right, on the screen. He could see that when he had when he thought about his relationship with his own father, which was what he was playing out with his son, he understood what was actually going on. And that being able to view that physically was enough for him to understand
what he needed to correct.
He was in control. Exactly, James. He was in control of actually what he was doing physically. That then had a big effect on what was happening to him mentally and emotionally, because once he understood that he had some hand in the physical sense of what was going on, it comes back to what I said before about, he had that realization that there wasn't as much wrong with him as he thought there was, because he understood that there was this massive physical component that was involved in it, that he had some control over. And that, in a sense, it was a breathing issue, but it wasn't a breathing issue, right? And this is quite often what happens in our work, is that it quite often will be a mental and emotional issue that has that vicious loop involved in it.
Or a relational issue.
Yes, very much so.
And back to Jason. Are there any closing remarks you would like to leave us with today, Jay?
Boy, I think more than anything, I'm just so filled up with, I'm thinking about my toughest clients that I've worked with. And I mean this, very complicated, multifactorial. Many times the solution that I ground them in is breathing every day. Spend time breathing, spend time trying to cultivate that calming state. And, they're like, but my digestion and this, and I'm like, I'm telling you, I don't understand all the connections, but I know when I work with thousands of people over, 2.5 decades at this point, people that take time to do these practices get better faster. And I'm not just trying to plug the show, but it's just true. It's just a very true statement. So Shane, I just want to say thank you so much for, you're a good friend. I love you guys. Angelina, tell her hi. We'll have her on the show too, and have her give her perspective of all of this. Have you back on the show, because what I said in the green room was, Shane, and we didn't even talk about this. Shane is the guy that can teach us to be calm in those stressful situations and also somehow make money while we're doing it. And I want to talk more about those strategies as well, because people need money I mean, people can be healthy without money, but it's sure a lot easier if you have a little bit of capital. It takes stress away, and it just helps. At any rate, but thank you so much. Say thank you.
And I'll just go ahead and wrap us up for the day, Shane. It's been absolutely transformational. Our conversation was a bit organic, but a bit structured. I think that there's been some amazing takeaways for not only myself and Dr. Jason, but for the people that listen to our show. And with your control of breath and the performance through the power of breath, it's really substantial for people to understand this. You have created a truly special community called the Online Breathing Academy. And I want to make sure that people know how to go and find that. That will be on the landing page with the show notes. But you actually teach people how to harness their breath as the ultimate tool for stress management, enhanced focus, better sleep, and improved resilience. This isn't just a breathing exercise. It's about fundamentally changing the way and how you experience life one breath at a time. And to our audience out there, remember, nobody's coming to save you, but solutions like this prove you can save yourself. And Shane, thank you again for sharing your wisdom with our GBF Nation. And to our GBF Nation, thank you for listening and your continued support. And for everybody out there, the best way to support this is share the show with somebody that needs it. If you know somebody that's dealing with anything as complex as what we've discussed on today's episode, reach out to Shane, reach out to Dr. Jason and myself, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and never miss an episode and get all the behind the scenes content like this episode and the hijinks that we've got coming your way. And anybody that knows Jason and I in the green room, they know we can get a few laughs going. And we've got more incredible guests lined up who are going to blow your mind with real solutions for reclaiming your health, your happiness, and your life. And you're just one step away, or maybe one breath away. Until next time, keep questioning everything and keep getting better faster. Shane, thank you so much. And Dr. Jason, thank you so much. This was a powerful episode. We'll see you guys on the next one. Part 2.
Everybody. Love you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the Get Better Faster podcast. Join the movement and visit getbetterfasterpodcast.com to find all our episodes, micro content, and resources to help you and your family get better faster.